Kira had lived for 300 years in the Crystal Forest, and in all that time she had never seen anything quite like the metal object that streaked across the purple sky, leaving a trail of fire and smoke behind it like a wounded comet. Elven Council would call an emergency meeting about this, she knew, because they called emergency meetings about everything from unexpected weather patterns to the migration of the silver deer. But Kira had stopped attending those meetings decades ago when she realized that talking about the world was very different from actually living in it. Her dragons Ash and Ember were restless that evening, and they paced around the clearing near her dwelling with their massive clawed feet, leaving deep impressions in the moss-covered ground, and their scales, which normally shimmered with colors that shifted between bronze and gold, now seemed dull with agitation. Something falls from the sky. Ash rumbled in the deep, wordless language that only Kira could fully understand after centuries of bonding, and his eyes, which were the color of molten copper, fixed on the distant mountains where smoke still rose. Ember, who was smaller but fiercer than her brother, let out a low growl that made the trees around them shiver, and she spread her wings in a display that would have terrified any creature that did not know her, as well as Kira did. "We should investigate," Kira said aloud, even though she could communicate with them through thought alone, because sometimes speaking made decisions feel more real and more final. "The Council will forbid it," Ash warned, and he was right, because the Council forbade almost everything that involved risk or change or contact with the world beyond their protected forest. "Then we will not ask permission," Kira replied, and she felt a small thrill of rebellion that reminded her of when she was young, only a century old, and still believed that rules existed to be questioned rather than blindly followed. She gathered her supplies, which were minimal because elves needed very little to survive, and dragons needed even less, and within an hour they were soaring above the crystal forest, with the wind pulling at Kira's long silver hair and the world spreading out beneath them like a living map. The flight to the mountains took less time than she expected because Ash and Ember seemed to understand the urgency, even if they did not fully understand what had fallen from the sky, and they flew with powerful beats of their enormous wings that carried them over valleys and rivers and settlements, where other elves looked up in surprise to see dragons in flight. Kira had not left the forest in 50 years, and seeing the wider world again made something inside. Her chest tightened with an emotion she could not quite name because it was part excitement and part sorrow and part longing for something she had never experienced. The crash site was worse than anything she could have imagined, and the metal object, which she now understood was some kind of vehicle, had carved a deep scar into the mountainside and broken ancient trees and scattered debris across an area that would take days to fully explore. Fires burned with strange colors that she had never seen before, and the smell was acrid and wrong, like nothing nature had ever produced. And Ash and Ember both pulled back when they landed, keeping their distance from the wreckage as if it might attack them. "Stay alert," Kira told them as she approached the largest piece of the vehicle, and through a shattered opening she could see movement inside, which meant that whatever had been piloting this thing had survived the crash. She heard coughing, and then a voice speaking in a language she did not recognize, and the words were harsh and short compared to the flowing musical language of her own people. But there was something compelling about the rhythm of them. The figure that emerged from the wreckage was unlike anything she had seen in paintings or heard about in stories, and he was shorter than an elf but more heavily built, and his skin was darker than the pale complexion of her people, and his hair was black and cut short in a style that seemed practical rather than decorative. Blood ran down the side of his face from a cut above his eye, and his clothing, which appeared to be some kind of uniform, was torn and burned in several places, and he moved with obvious pain, but also with determination, as he pulled himself free of the twisted metal. When he saw her, he froze completely, and his eyes, which were brown like rich earth, went wide with an expression that Kira recognized as shock mixed with wonder. And for a long moment they simply stared at each other across the smoking wreckage, while Ash and Ember watched from a distance, ready to protect her if needed. "You are real," the stranger said. And even though Kira did not know his language, she understood the meaning through the tone and the expression on his face, because amazement sounded the same in any tongue. "I am Kira," she replied in her own language, and then she tried to reach out with her mind the way she did with animals to see if this creature had any capacity for deeper communication. To her surprise, she felt something reach back, And it was not the clear, wordless connection she shared with her dragons, but rather a jumble of thoughts and emotions that were so intense and so rapid that she almost pulled away from the contact. The stranger seemed to feel it too, because he gasped and put a hand to his head, and then he smiled despite his injuries, and the smile transformed his face from something foreign and frightening into something almost beautiful in its openness. "My name is Alex," he said slowly. And this time Kira felt the meaning transferred directly from his mind to hers, through the tentative bridge they had formed. And she realized that this being had some latent ability for mental communication, even if his people did not normally use it. "You are hurt," she told him. And the thought carried across the bridge between them, and she moved closer, despite Ash's warning growl. Because her healer training was stronger than her caution, Alex tried to stand, but his legs gave out, and Kira caught him before he could fall. And his weight surprised her because he was much heavier than an elf of similar size would be. And his skin was hot to the touch in a way that made her aware of how cool her own body temperature ran. The physical contact strengthened their mental connection, and suddenly Kira was flooded with images from Alex's mind, and she saw vast cities made entirely of metal and glass, and she saw ships that traveled between stars, and she saw crowds of humans, because that was what his species was called, all living together in numbers that seemed impossible. She also felt his emotions, and there was pain from his injuries, but also overwhelming joy and wonder, because he had been searching for proof of intelligent alien life for years, and now he had found not just one species but dragons as well. "Your ship is destroyed," she told him gently as she helped him sit against a piece of wreckage that was not burning. And Ember cautiously moved closer to sniff at him with hot breath that made his short hair stand up. "I know," Alex replied through their link, and there was sadness in the thought, but also acceptance, because apparently humans were practical about such things. And then he slowly reached out toward Ember with a hand that trembled slightly from injury or fear, or both. Ember could have bitten off his hand with one snap of her massive jaws, but instead she allowed him to touch her snout, and Kira felt the dragon's surprise through their bond. Because Ember did not usually tolerate strangers, and especially not strange creatures from the sky. "You are not afraid of them," Alex observed, and his hand stayed steady on Ember's scales, even though she was large enough to swallow him whole. "They are my family," Kira replied, and family was a concept that translated clearly through their mental link, because apparently it was universal across species. Over the next hours, as the sun set and the moons rose, Kira did what she could to treat Alex's injuries with the herbs and medicines she had brought, and he told her about humans and their vast civilization that spanned multiple worlds, and their endless curiosity that drove them to explore even when it was dangerous. She told him about elves and their long lives, and their deep connection to nature and magic, and their tendency to avoid change and risk, which was why she had stopped attending council meetings. The dragons settled around them like living walls, and Ash even allowed Alex to lean against his side for warmth as the mountain air grew cold, and Kira realized that something significant had happened today, something that would change her life in ways she could not yet predict. Alex fell asleep, eventually exhausted from his injuries in the crash, and Kira sat awake watching him, and wondering what the council would say when they found out she had made contact with an alien species, and wondering if she even cared what they said anymore. The stars above were the same stars that Alex had traveled between, and Kira looked at them with new understanding, because they were not just distant lights but destinations and possibilities, and she felt something stirring inside her that had been dormant for decades. It was the feeling of wanting something, more than the safe, predictable life she had been living. And as she sat there with a human sleeping against her dragon in the crystal forest far behind her, Kira made a decision that she knew would horrify the council. She would help this human, and learn from him, and perhaps in doing so she would finally figure out what had been missing from her long life. Morning came with the triple sunrise that painted the mountains in shades of pink and gold and orange, and Alex woke slowly with confusion evident on his face before memory returned, and he sat up too quickly and winced from the pain of his injuries. Kira had not slept because elves needed less rest than most creatures, and she had spent the night hours exploring the crash site and salvaging what she could from the wreckage. And she had found several intact containers that held items she did not recognize but thought might be important. You saved my life, Alex said through their mental link, which had grown stronger overnight. And there was gratitude in the thought, but also something deeper that Kira did not yet have a name for. Anyone would have done the same, she replied. But even as she thought it, she knew it was not true, because most elves would have reported the crash to the council and let them decide what to do. And by the time the council finished debating, Alex would have died from his injuries or exposure. Ember brought them breakfast, which consisted of a mountain goat she had hunted in the early morning, and Alex looked uncertain about eating raw meat until Kira used a small fire spell to cook a portion for him, and his relief was almost comical. "Your magic is real," he said with wonder as he ate, and it works so differently from anything we understand about physics and energy. Kira did not know what physics meant, but she understood that humans had their own way of explaining the world, and it involved metal and machines rather than the natural forces that elves commanded. "Can all of your people do this?" Alex asked, gesturing to the small flames that still danced in her palm. "Most can perform basic magic," she explained. "But my abilities are stronger than average, which is why I was chosen to bond with dragons, and the bonding itself increased my power even more." Through their link, she felt his curiosity spike, and he wanted to know everything about the bonding process and about dragon biology and about how magic actually worked on a fundamental level. And his mind was so hungry for information that it was almost overwhelming. Ash, who had been circling overhead, landed nearby and fixed Alex with an intense stare that would have terrified most beings, but Alex met the dragon's gaze steadily, and Kira felt a pulse of respect flow from Ash, which was significant because her dragon did not respect easily. "Your ship," she said, changing the subject, because she had questions of her own will. "Others of your kind come looking for you." Alex nodded and pulled out a small device from his pocket that was cracked but still functioning, and he pressed something on its surface, and it lit up with symbols. That meant nothing to Kira. "I activated my emergency beacon before the crash," he explained, "but rescue could take weeks or even months depending on how far off course I was thrown, and the nearest human outpost is several star systems away." "Months," Kira repeated, and she realized that this meant Alex would be staying with her for an extended period, and the thought should have concerned her. But instead she felt something that might have been anticipation. "I will need shelter," Alex said, looking around at the mountainside and food and water, and he spoke matter-of-factly as if he were simply listing tasks that needed completion, rather than facing a survival situation on an alien world. "You will stay with me," Kira told him, and it was not really a question because she had already decided. "And I will teach you how to survive here, and you will teach me about your people and their worlds." The arrangement seemed fair to both of them, and over the next days they fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural despite coming from completely different species and worlds. Kira led them back toward the crystal forest, but not to her dwelling near the council buildings. Instead, she took them to a remote valley that she had discovered years ago, where a waterfall fed a clear pool and caves provided shelter. And the hunting was good. Alex proved to be more adaptable than she expected, and he learned quickly how to identify safe plants and how to move through the forest without disturbing the natural order, and how to communicate basic concepts to Ash and Ember through a combination of gestures and simple thoughts. The dragons took to him with surprising ease, and Ember especially seemed fascinated by him, and she would often curl around him at night, providing warmth and protection, and Ash taught him how to fly by allowing him to ride on his back, which was an honor rarely given to anyone outside of Kira herself. Through their mental link, Kira learned about human civilization, and it was both inspiring and terrifying because humans had accomplished so much in such a short time. But they had also made terrible mistakes, and fought destructive wars and damaged their own worlds through carelessness. But they learned from their mistakes, Alex insisted when she expressed concern about his species, and we adapted and grew. And now we explore the stars not to conquer, but to understand, and connect. Elves also explore, Kira replied, but we do it so slowly and carefully that by the time we decide something is safe, the opportunity has often passed. She told him about the council and their endless debates about whether to make contact with other species that they knew existed in the wider galaxy, and how 300 years of discussion had produced no actual action. Alex laughed at this, and his laughter was a bright, warm sound that echoed through the valley and made even Ash snort with what might have been amusement. "In my world, He said we have a saying that perfection is the enemy of progress, and it sounds like your counsel is trying so hard to make the perfect decision that they never make any decision at all. The observation stung because it was true, and Kira had been guilty of the same paralysis in her own life, and she had spent decades in the Crystal Forest doing the same things over and over because they were safe and known and required no risk. But risk was what made life interesting. Alex told her one evening, as they sat by the pool, watching the moons reflect on the water, and every important thing I have ever done involved risk, and yes, sometimes I failed. But the failures taught me as much as the successes. Kira thought about her own long life and realized that she had very few failures because she had attempted very few things that might result in failure, and the realization made her feel hollow. "Teach me," she asked him, "and teach me how humans live with so much uncertainty." Alex smiled and reached out to take her hand, and the physical contact sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with connection. We live by accepting that we cannot control everything, he said, and we make the best choices we can with the information we have. And then we adapt when things do not go as planned. Over the following weeks, Alex taught her many things, and he taught her human games that involved strategy and luck, and he taught her songs from his world that had rhythms completely different from elven music, and he taught her that laughter was medicine for the soul. She taught him elven meditation techniques that helped him strengthen their mental link, and she taught him basic magic, which he could perform with surprising skill once he learned to feel the natural energy around him, and she taught him that patience was not the same as paralysis. The dragons thrived with Alex present because his energy and enthusiasm were infectious, and they began to play again, something they had not done since they were young, and watching them chase each other through the sky, while Alex whooped with joy, made Kira realize how much joy had been missing from her own life one night, as they sat by the fire with Ash and Ember sleeping nearby. Alex asked her about elven concepts of love and family and relationships. "We bond for life," she explained. "And once we choose a partner, we are connected to them until death, and the bond is deep and permanent and cannot be broken." "That sounds beautiful," Alex said, "but also terrifying, because what if you choose wrong?" "We do not choose wrong," Kira replied, "because we take decades or even centuries to make such decisions, and we analyze compatibility and discuss expectations and ensure that the match is logical." "But what about passion?" Alex asked, "And what about the feeling of not being able to imagine your life without someone, even though you have only known them a short time?" Kira looked at him and realized that he was not asking a theoretical question, and through their link she felt his emotions, and they were complex and intense and directed at her. "Humans feel this?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. "Yes," Alex said simply, "and I feel it now." The admission hung in the air between them, and Kira felt her own emotions rising to match his, and she had lived for 300 years and bonded with dragons and mastered magic, but she had never felt anything quite like what she felt in this moment. "Show me," she whispered, "and show me how humans love." Alex moved closer and cupped her face with his hands, which were rough from work, but gentle in their touch, and he kissed her with a softness that contradicted everything she had heard about human intensity. The kiss lasted only moments, but Kira felt something fundamental shift inside her, and it was as if 3 centuries of careful control and measured decisions suddenly meant nothing compared to this one impulsive choice. When they pulled apart, Alex smiled at her with such open affection that she felt tears form in her eyes, and elves rarely cried, because crying was considered a loss of composure. "This is how humans love," he said, "and without certainty, without guarantees, and without knowing if it will last. But choosing it anyway, because the alternative is never feeling this at all." The weeks turned into months, and the valley became a world unto itself, where time moved differently than in the Crystal Forest, and where Kira learned what it meant to live rather than simply exist. Alex built structures using both human engineering principles and elven materials, and the result was a shelter that was more comfortable than anything Kira had lived in before, with spaces for working and sleeping, and even a small area where he conducted experiments trying to understand how magic interacted with the physical laws he had learned in his human education. His injuries healed completely thanks to Kira's herbal remedies and her healing magic, and soon he was moving through the forest with the confidence of someone who belonged. There and the other creatures of the valley seemed to accept him as part of the natural order. The dragons continued to amaze them both with their intelligence and their capacity for growth. And Ember learned to understand basic human speech even, though she could not produce the sounds. And Ash developed a fondness for the strategic games that Alex taught him playing by moving pieces with careful applications of his claws. Kira found herself changing in ways she had not anticipated, and she laughed more easily and took risks that would have terrified her before, and discovered that failure was not the catastrophe she had always imagined, but rather just information that helped her improve. Alex taught her about human art and music and literature, and she was amazed by how much beauty his species had created despite their short lives, or perhaps because of them. And she began to understand that urgency could be a gift rather than a curse. She taught him advanced magic, and he proved to have a natural talent for it that surprised them both, and soon he could manipulate fire and water with skill that took most elves decades to develop. And he approached magic with a scientist's curiosity that led to discoveries that challenged traditional elven understanding. One afternoon while they were swimming in the pool below the waterfall, Alex asked her about the Elven Council and whether she missed her old life. "I do not miss the life," she admitted as she floated on her back looking up at the sky where Ash and Ember were doing aerial acrobatics, "but I do miss some of the people, and I wonder what they think happened to me. They probably assume you were eaten by a dangerous creature," Alex said with a grin, "and they are probably having very long meetings about whether to send a search party." Kira laughed because he was almost certainly right, and the council would turn even a simple rescue mission into a months-long debate about protocols and procedures and risk assessment. "Do you miss your life?" she asked him. "And do you regret the crash that brought you here?" Alex was quiet for a moment, floating beside her, and through their link, she felt him considering the question seriously. "I miss some things," he finally said, "and I miss my family and my friends and the work I was doing, but I cannot regret this because meeting you and Ash and Ember has been the most important thing that has ever happened to me." The honesty of the statement made Kira's heart ache in a way that was both painful and wonderful, and she reached out to take his hand under the water. "Your people will come eventually," she said. "And what will happen then? I do not know," Alex admitted. "And they will want me to return, and they will want to study this world and make contact with your people, and everything will change." "Change is not always bad," Kira replied, even though part of her wanted to keep this perfect valley existence forever unchanged. That night, as they sat by the fire, Alex told her more about human concepts of love and commitment, and she learned that humans often chose to bond with each other, even knowing that one of them would die first, because human lifespans were so short compared to elves. "How do you bear it?" she asked. "And how do you love someone knowing you will lose them?" "We bear it because the alternative is never loving at all," Alex said, "and every human understands that life is temporary, and that makes the time we have more precious, not less." Kira thought about her own lifespan and how she had centuries ahead of her, and for the first time that felt like a burden rather than a gift, because it meant she would outlive Alex by hundreds of years, unless she told him slowly, and unless there is a way to extend your life through magic. Alex's eyes widened. "And is that possible? I do not know," Kira admitted, "but there are old texts in the Crystal Forest libraries that speak of life extension magic, and it is forbidden because the council decided long ago that extending life artificially was against natural order." "Of course they did," Alex said with affectionate exasperation, "and let me guess, they debated it for a century before deciding." "2 centuries, actually," Kira replied with a smile, "but I no longer care what the council forbids." The next day, she took Alex to a hidden cave system that she had discovered years ago, and deep within the caves were crystal formations that hummed with magical energy, and she had always suspected they were important, but had never investigated because she had been following the rules. Now, with Alex beside her and the dragons guarding the entrance, she began to study the crystals using both her magical senses and Alex's scientific instruments, and together they discovered that the crystals were not just storing magic but actually generating it through a process that neither of them fully understood. "This could change everything," Alex said with excitement in his voice. and if we can understand how this works, we might be able to bridge the gap between magic and technology. Over the following weeks, they worked together on understanding the crystals, and Kira found that she enjoyed the collaborative process of discovery more than she had ever enjoyed solitary study, and Alex's different perspective led to insights that she never would have reached alone. They also discovered that the crystals had healing properties that went beyond simple injury repair. And when Alex cut himself accidentally on a sharp edge, the crystal not only healed the wound, but seemed to strengthen his body at a cellular level. Could this extend life? Kira asked hopefully. Possibly, Alex said as he examined the readings on his instruments, but we would need to do more research. And careful testing research became their focus, and they spent long hours in the cave system, documenting the crystals and experimenting with different magical applications. And Alex rigged up a way to power his remaining technology using crystal energy, which allowed him to analyze things that would have been impossible with magic. Alone, Ash and Ember seemed fascinated by the crystals as well, and they would often lie near the largest formations soaking in the energy. And one day, Ember did something unexpected, and she breathed a small stream of fire onto a crystal cluster. And instead of melting or cracking, the crystals absorbed the fire and began to glow with an internal light. The dragons know something we do not, Alex observed, and they have instincts about these crystals that we should pay attention to. Following Ember's example, they began experimenting with dragon fire and crystal interaction, and they discovered that the combination created a particularly potent form of magical energy that could be used for healing and enhancement and potentially for life extension. Kira felt hope growing inside her, and hope was something she had not felt in a very long time, because she had become so accustomed to accepting things as they were rather than working to change them. But reality intruded on their Perfect Valley existence when one morning, Alex's emergency beacon began receiving a response signal, and he looked at the device with mixed emotions, clearly visible on his face. "They are coming," he said, "and a rescue ship will be here within 2 weeks." 2 weeks felt both too long and too short, and Kira felt panic rising in her chest because she was not ready to face the consequences of what they had built together. "Need to decide what we are going to do," Alex said gently, "and when my people arrive, they will have questions and expectations." "What do you want?" Kira asked. "I want you to come with me," Alex replied without hesitation. "And I want to show you the stars, and introduce you to my family and share all the wonders of human civilization with you." "And I want that too," Kira admitted. "But I also know that your people might not accept me, and that they might see me as a curiosity or a threat, rather than as a person." "Then we make them understand," Alex said with that stubborn determination she had come to love, "and we show them that different species can not only coexist, but can love each other and learn from each other." "But what about the dragons?" Kira asked, because she would never leave Ash and Ember behind. "They come too," Alex said firmly, "and if the rescue ship has a problem with that, then they can wait while we find another solution." Kira felt tears forming again, and she had cried more in the past months with Alex than in the previous 3 centuries combined. "I love you," she told him, using the human concept because the elven language did not have a direct equivalent, and through their link, she felt his joy at hearing the words spoken. Aloud, "I love you too," Alex replied, "and whatever happens next, we face it together." The next 2 weeks were a flurry of activity, and they gathered everything they had learned about the crystals and prepared documentation that would prove their discoveries. And they also spent time simply being together, knowing that their quiet valley existence was coming to an end. Kira used magic to contact the council and inform them that she was alive and that she had made first contact with an alien species, and the response was predictably outraged and concerned and filled with demands that she return immediately for debriefing. The rescue ship arrived exactly when Alex had predicted, and it descended from the sky with a low rumbling sound that made the ground shake, and lights that turned night into day, and Kira had to steady herself against Ash because the sheer size and power of the vessel was overwhelming. Ember growled low in her throat and her scales rippled with agitation, but she held her position because Kira had asked her to remain calm, and the dragon trusted her bondmate even when faced with something as foreign as human technology. The ship landed in a clearing near the valley, and a door opened in its side, and several humans emerged wearing uniforms, similar to what Alex had worn when he crashed, and they stopped abruptly when they saw the dragons. And Kira could feel their fear and confusion even without a mental link. Alex stepped forward with his hand raised in greeting, and his voice carried clearly across the distance as he called out to his people and told them that everything was safe and that the dragons were friendly. A woman who appeared to be the leader approached cautiously, and she had short red hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing, and she looked at Alex with an expression that was part relief and part anger. "Lieutenant Brooks," the woman said, "and we have been searching for you for 3 months, and your last transmission indicated a critical system failure." Captain Lauren Alex replied with a salute that seemed automatic, "And I apologize for the delay in communication, but as you can see, I had some unexpected complications." Lauren looked past him at Kira and the dragons, and her expression shifted from professional concern to genuine shock, and she spoke rapidly into a communication device on her wrist, calling other crew members to come and witness what she was seeing. "This is Kira," Alex said, gesturing for Kira to come forward, "and she is from the indigenous intelligent species of this planet, and these are her companions." Ash and Ember. Kira stepped forward, with as much grace as she could manage, and she was acutely aware of how different she must look to these humans, with her silver hair and pale skin, and eyes that were too large and too bright to be human. She tried to project calm confidence, but inside she was terrified because this was the moment that would determine whether she and Alex could have a future together, or whether their species differences would prove insurmountable. Captain Lauren. Kira said, carefully pronouncing the human words aloud for the first time, "And I come in peace and friendship, and I wish to learn about your people." Lauren stared at her for a long moment, and then she did something unexpected, and she laughed, and the sound was full of wonder rather than mockery. "Speak English," she said. "And how is that possible?" "We share a mental link," Alex explained, "and it allows us to communicate directly and to learn each other's languages." Lauren looked skeptical but also fascinated, and she approached closer while her crew members maintained a cautious distance and kept their weapons ready, even though they were not pointed at anyone. "I need to report this to headquarters," she said, "and first contact with an intelligent species is well above my authority level." "I understand," Kira replied, but I ask that you also understand that I am not just a discovery to be reported, and I am a person with my own agency and my own choices." Lauren's expression softened slightly and noted. She said, "And for what it is worth, you are handling this situation with far more dignity than most humans would in your position." Over the next hours, the rescue ship's crew set up equipment and took readings and asked endless questions, and Kira answered what she could while Alex filled in details about the past months and about what they had discovered regarding the magical crystals. The crew was professional, but Kira could sense their underlying emotions, and some were curious and excited, while others were fearful or suspicious, and one young crew member kept staring at the dragons as if expecting them to attack at any moment. Ash seemed to find this amusing, and he would occasionally huff smoke in the direction of the nervous crew member just to watch him jump. And Ember was more direct in her approach, and she simply ignored all the humans except Alex and Kira, as if they were beneath her notice. Captain Lauren asked to speak with Alex privately, and Kira felt a spike of anxiety because she knew that this conversation would be crucial. And she stayed with the dragons while Alex went into the ship with his captain. Through their link, she could feel his emotions, and he was defensive and determined and absolutely unwilling to compromise on certain points, and she also felt Lauren's surprise and confusion as Alex explained his relationship with Kira. The conversation lasted over an hour, and when Alex emerged, he looked tired but satisfied, and he came directly to Kira and took her hands in his. "She has agreed to take us all to the nearest human station," he told her, "and from there we can decide our next steps. But I need you to know that some people will not accept our relationship, and some will see you as a threat or a resource to be studied." "I expected this," Kira replied, "and I am willing to face whatever comes as long as we face it together. The dragons will need special accommodation," Alex continued, but Lauren has agreed to modify one of the cargo bays to serve as a temporary habitat for them. "During the journey, Ash and Ember will adapt," Kira said with more confidence than she felt, "and they have faced stranger things than space travel." The next day was spent preparing for departure, and the crew worked efficiently to pack up their equipment and to make modifications to the ship. And Kira spent the time gathering items from the valley that she wanted to bring with her, including samples of the magical crystals and various plants that might not exist anywhere else. She also took time to say goodbye to the valley itself, and she walked through the forests and along the streams and up to the waterfall where she had spent so many hours with Alex, and she tried to memorize every detail because she knew she might never return. Leaving felt like tearing away a piece of herself, but it also felt like stepping into a larger, more expansive version of who she could become. And she thought about what her old teacher Vera had said about living, rather than just existing, when it was time to board the ship. Kira felt her heart racing, and the interior was all metal and artificial lights and strange humming sounds that made her skin prickle with unease, and everything smelled wrong, like chemicals and recycled air instead of growing things. Ash and Ember had to be coaxed into the cargo bay, and even then they were clearly uncomfortable, and they pressed close to Kira and rumbled their distress until she stayed with them and used soothing magic to help them calm. Alex came to check on them and brought blankets and food, and he sat with Kira on the cargo bay floor while the ship prepared for launch. "This is really happening," she said, "and we are really leaving my world. We can still change our minds." Alex offered, and we could stay here and wait for the council to decide what to do. "No," Kira replied firmly, "and I have spent 3 centuries waiting for the council to decide things, and I am done waiting, and I want to see the stars." The launch was terrifying, and the ship shook and roared, and gravity seemed to shift in impossible ways, and the dragons roared back in challenge and fear. And Kira held on to Ash with one hand, and Alex with the other, and tried not to panic. Then suddenly everything smoothed out, and through a viewport, she could see her world falling away below them, getting smaller and smaller until it was just a green and blue sphere floating in darkness. And she felt a wave of homesickness so intense, it was almost physical. But she also felt wonder, because the view was beautiful beyond anything she had imagined, and the stars were no longer distant points of light but destinations that humans traveled between as easily as elves walked through forests. "Welcome to space," Alex said with a smile. "And this is just the beginning." The journey to the human station took 5 days, and during that time Kira learned about human technology and culture, and met more crew members who ranged from welcoming to wary, and she tried to answer their questions without revealing information that might put her people at risk. She also learned that humans were incredibly diverse, and they came in many different shades and sizes and had different customs and beliefs, and it made the elven tendency toward uniformity seem restrictive by comparison. Captain Lauren turned out to be more sympathetic than Kira had initially thought, and she spent time talking with Kira about the challenges of being a woman in a leadership position, and about the importance of standing firm in one's choices even when others questioned them. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," Lauren told her one evening, "and I also chose a path that others said was impossible, and I made it work through sheer stubbornness." Kira appreciated the companionship, and she had not realized how much she missed having female friends because she had isolated herself so much in the crystal forest. Ash and Ember gradually adapted to the ship environment, and they learned that the cargo bay was safe and that the crew would not hurt them. And Ember even allowed some of the braver crew members to touch her scales, which was a significant gesture of trust. Alex spent much of his time writing reports and preparing documentation about everything they had discovered, and he wanted to ensure that the information was presented in a way that would encourage cooperation and understanding, rather than exploitation. One night, as they lay together in the small quarters they had been assigned, Kira asked Alex what he thought would happen when they reached the station. The station was overwhelming in ways that Kira had not anticipated, and everywhere she looked there were humans moving with purpose through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, and the noise was constant with voices and machines and announcements, echoing through speakers that she could not locate. Ash and Ember had to be transported in a special cargo container to a secure habitat area, and Kira hated being separated from them. But she understood the necessity, because 2 full-grown dragons wandering through a human station would cause panic. Alex stayed close to her side as they navigated the bureaucratic process of official arrival, and there were forms to fill out and medical scans to undergo, and countless questions from officials. who seemed both excited and nervous about her presence, a woman named Commander Chen, who appeared to be in charge of first contact protocols, met with them in a private conference room, and she had gray hair and kind eyes, but also an air of authority. That reminded Kira of the Elven Council elders. "You have created quite a situation," she told Alex with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. "And first contact is supposed to be carefully planned with teams of specialists and diplomatic preparations." "Apologize," Commander Alex replied. But crash landing was not exactly planned either." Chen turned her attention to Kira and studied her with an intensity that was professional rather than hostile. "And you understand that your presence here raises complicated questions about interspecies relations and about how we proceed with contact with your people." "I understand," Kira replied, meeting her gaze steadily, "but I am here as an individual making my own choices, not as a representative of my people, and the Elven Council will make their own decisions about broader contact when they are ready." "That could take centuries," Alex added, "and based on what Kira has told me about their decision-making process." Chen sighed. "And we do not have centuries," she said, "but we can work with what we have, and for now you will both be assigned quarters in the diplomatic section, and you will have access to basic station facilities, but there will be security escorts until we establish protocols." "That seems reasonable," Kira said, even though the idea of being constantly watched made her uncomfortable. "There is also the matter of your relationship," Chen continued, "and Alex has filed for joint assignment status, which is unusual, but not unprecedented, and however, you should both be aware that your relationship will be scrutinized and there will be those who question whether it is genuine or appropriate. It is both genuine and appropriate," Alex said with heat in his voice, and we knew this would be difficult. "But that does not make our feelings less valid." "I believe you," Chen replied gently, but my belief is not enough, and you will need to demonstrate over time that this relationship is stable and healthy, and based on mutual respect rather than exotic attraction or power imbalance." Kira felt anger rising at the implication, but she forced herself to remain calm. "And I have lived for 300 years, she said quietly. "And I have had numerous opportunities for relationships with my own people, and I chose Alex not because he is exotic, but because he sees me as an equal, and because he challenges me to grow in ways I had stopped growing." Chen nodded slowly. "And that is exactly the kind of clarity you will need to maintain," he said, "and because the questions will not stop and you will need to prove yourselves over and over the following weeks." Kira began to understand what Chen had meant, and everywhere she went, people stared and whispered, and some approached with genuine curiosity while others kept their distance with obvious suspicion. The dragons were housed in a modified hangar bay that had been converted into a habitat with artificial sunlight and space to fly, and Kira visited them daily, and they were adapting better than she had hoped, though they clearly missed the open sky. Human scientists wanted to study everything about her, from her biology to her magic to her mental connection with Alex and the dragons, and she agreed to some studies because she understood that knowledge led to understanding. But she also set firm boundaries about what she would and would not permit. Alex returned to his duties as a lieutenant, but he was also assigned to work with the first contact team, helping to develop protocols for potential future interactions with the Elven people. And Kira could feel through their link how passionate he was about ensuring those protocols respected Elven autonomy. They were given quarters together after Alex formally submitted paperwork declaring their bonded status, and the quarters were small but comfortable with a view of space that Kira found both beautiful and lonely at night when they were alone. Alex taught her more about human culture and showed her recordings of Earth and other human worlds, and Kira was amazed by the diversity of human experience and by how much they had achieved in such a short time as a species. She also taught him more advanced magic, and with access to the crystal samples they had brought, they continued their research into life extension, and they made progress that excited them both because it suggested that combining magic and human medical technology might indeed extend human lifespan significantly. But not all of their time was consumed by research and adaptation, and they also found moments of simple happiness, and they explored the station together and met other crew members, and Kira even developed friendships with several humans who saw past her differences. To the person beneath, one woman named Captain Rachel, who commanded a deep space exploration vessel, became a particular friend, and she invited Kira to her quarters for meals, and taught her about human cooking, and listened with genuine interest to stories about elven culture. "You know, people are taking bets on your relationship," Rachel told her one evening over dinner, "and some think it will not last, and others think you will become the most famous couple in human history. What do you think?" Kira asked. "I think you are two people who love each other," Rachel replied. And that is all that matters regardless of species." The simplicity of the statement made Kira smile, because humans had a way of cutting through complexity to reach essential truths. After 2 months on the station, Commander Chen called them in for a meeting, and her expression was serious. "And we have received communication from your people," she told Kira, "and the Elven Council has sent a delegation to discuss formal first contact." Kira felt her stomach drop because she had known this was coming, but she had hoped for more time to establish herself in the human world before having to face the council. "When do they arrive?" Alex asked. Taking Kira's hand under the table, 3 days, Chen replied. And they have specifically requested to meet with you, Kira, as well as with our diplomatic team." "Of course they have," Kira muttered. "And they probably want to lecture me about proper protocol and bringing shame to our people." Chen raised an eyebrow. "And is that what you expect?" Kira sighed. "And I expect them to be disappointed in my choices," she said, and to try to convince me to return home and to warn humans about the dangers of rushing into contact." "Then we will be prepared," Alex said firmly, and we will show them that meaningful connection between species is possible." The 3 days passed too quickly, and Kira spent the time preparing herself mentally for the confrontation she knew was coming, and she practiced arguments in her mind and tried to anticipate every possible criticism. When the elven ship arrived, it was beautiful in a way that made Kira's heart ache, and it was organic in design, flowing and graceful like a living thing rather than the angular functionality of human vessels. The delegation consisted of 5 elves, including Elder Vera, who had sent Kira the encouraging message, and 2 council members, and 2 diplomatic specialists, and they moved through the station with visible discomfort at being surrounded by so much metal and artificial environment. The meeting was held in a large conference room, and Kira sat with Alex on one side of a long table, while the elven delegation sat across from them, and Commander Chen and her team occupied neutral ground at the head of the table. Elder Vera spoke first, and her voice was gentle but firm. "And Kira, you have violated numerous protocols and caused significant concern among our people." "I understand," Kira replied, but I also believe that protocols should serve the people, not the other way around." One of the council members, whose name was Marcus, spoke next, and his tone was stern. "And you have bonded yourself to an alien being without proper study or understanding of the consequences." "Have studied him for months," Kira countered, "and I understand him better than I have understood most elves I have known for decades." The other council member, named Helen, added, "And you have also revealed the existence of magic to outsiders, which has been forbidden for millennia." "Magic is not a secret to be hoarded," Kira said with growing frustration, "and it is a tool that could benefit all species if shared responsibly." Elder Vera held up a hand to silence the others. "And child," she said, looking at Kira with ancient eyes, "and we are not here to punish you, but to understand. And you have always been different from other elves, always questioning, always seeking more than what was offered, because what was offered was stagnation." Kira replied, "And 300 years of my life spent doing nothing of significance while the galaxy moved on without us. And now you wish to drag us into that moving galaxy?" Vera said. "No," Kira replied, "and I wish to give us the choice to join it on our own terms, rather than hiding until the choice is taken from us."